Nothing is wrong. And you never get to rest from that. Even when everything is quiet, something in you stays alert. Not in a dramatic way. Out of habit. You learned early that relaxing comes at a cost. That lowering your guard is a risk smart people don't take. So you stay ready, always. The problem is that readiness became identity. And now you don't know who you are without it. You call this maturity. But maturity doesn't require living in anticipation of losses that don't exist yet. You're not calm, you're holding. And holding, over time, charges a price that doesn't show up as collapse. It shows up as distance. Like if this landed, nothing is technically wrong. Your life doesn't look like it's on fire. There's no visible collapse, no dramatic loss, no clear danger approaching. And yet your body behaves as if something is about to go wrong. You wake up already alert, not anxious in a loud way, just tight enough to be ready. Your mind checks the day before it begins. Conversations that haven't happened yet. Problems that might appear. Mistakes that could be made if you're not careful enough. You call it being responsible. You call it being prepared. You call it maturity. But the truth shows up elsewhere, in the way your shoulders never fully drop, in the way rest feels unfinished, in the way silence doesn't calm you, it activates you. Even when things are going well, you scan. Even when people are kind, you look for shifts. Even when nothing is required from you, you stay ready to respond. As if safety was something you could maintain by attention alone. As if relaxing were a risk. As if letting go of control would immediately cost you something. You don't notice how exhausting this is because it has become the background noise of your life. A low hum of vigilance. A constant internal posture of just in case. And the most dangerous part isn't the tension itself. It's how normal it feels. You're not panicking, you're functioning. Which makes it harder to see that your nervous system is living in a future that hasn't arrived yet. That your mind treats uncertainty not as a condition of life, but as a threat that must be neutralized. So you keep watching, adjusting, anticipating. Not because something is happening, but because something might. And that is where the real problem begins, long before you give it a name. What you call calm is actually restraint. What you call peace is vigilance held together by habit. You're not resting, you're standing still with your muscles engaged. There is a quiet tension behind everything you do, because certainty has become your emotional currency. You don't move unless the ground feels tested. You don't decide unless the outcome feels mapped. You don't relax unless you believe nothing unexpected can reach you. And that belief is fragile, so you keep tightening your grip on plans, on explanations, on other people's reactions, on yourself. You tell yourself that once things feel clearer, you'll breathe. Once you understand what's happening, you'll settle. Once you reduce the unknown, you'll finally feel okay. But clarity never lasts. There's always another variable, another silence to interpret, another tone to decode, another possibility your mind insists on reviewing before it lets you rest. You live as if certainty were a prerequisite for peace, as if life were something that could be made safe through foresight alone. And slowly, without noticing, your inner world turns into a surveillance room. You watching yourself, watching others, watching the future, not to enjoy it, to prevent damage. This is the part that rarely gets named. You're not afraid of pain. You're afraid of being caught off guard by it. So you rehearse, you prepare, you overthink, because if you can see it coming, you believe it won't hurt as much. If you predict it, you imagine you can survive it intact. But what this posture costs you is subtle and constant. Spontaneity dries up. Ease feels irresponsible. Joy feels suspicious when it doesn't come with guarantees. You don't feel safe enough to be present, only safe enough to stay alert. And the tragedy is that this doesn't feel like fear. It feels like intelligence, like self-respect, like being careful in a world that punishes mistakes, which is why it takes so long to realize what's actually happening. You didn't choose peace, you chose certainty. And you've been paying for it every day, in ways that are easy to dismiss and hard to escape. You learned early that being careful was praised. Thinking ahead was admired, not acting impulsively was considered strength. You became the one who plans, who considers consequences, who doesn't jump without checking the ground twice. People trust you because you don't surprise them. You're reliable, predictable, solid. And slowly, almost invisibly, this virtue hardens into an identity. You're no longer just someone who plans. You are the one who must not misstep. So caution stops being a tool and becomes a posture, a way of standing in the world, a way of earning approval without asking for it. You're the adult in the room, the composed one, the one who doesn't create problems, which means you also become the one who absorbs uncertainty instead of expressing it, who internalizes tension instead of letting situations unfold, who believes that if something goes wrong, it must mean you missed a sign. Responsibility starts to feel like vigilance. Maturity starts to feel like self-surveillance. You don't allow yourself to act until things feel right, but right keeps moving. You don't allow yourself to rest until risks feel neutralized, but risks don't disappear. They mutate, so the standard rises, the margin for error shrinks, and what once felt like competence starts to feel like pressure with a good reputation. The world rewards you for this. It reinforces the role. No one sees the cost because from the outside, you look composed. You look like someone who has things under control. But inside, your system is never off duty. You don't trust ease. You don't trust flow. You don't trust moments that don't come with explanation. Because somewhere along the way, you learned that being careful kept you safe. And now, letting go of that care feels like negligence. Not dangerous in a dramatic way. Dangerous in a quiet, private way. So you keep proving your worth through restraint. You keep earning safety by not needing too much. You keep calling this balance, without noticing that the very trait that once protected you has started to dictate the shape of your life. Here's the part you don't like to admit. Control didn't come from strength. It came from a moment where uncertainty felt unbearable. At some point, not knowing became associated with danger. Not having answers felt like exposure. Waiting felt like leaving yourself unprotected. So your mind adapted. It learned to move faster than life, to simulate outcomes before they happened, to reduce surprise by rehearsing every possible version of what could go wrong. This isn't strategy. It's a threat response that learned how to sound intelligent. The more you try to predict, the more your nervous system stays activated. Because prediction never delivers certainty, only temporary relief. Your brain doesn't calm down after you plan. It accelerates. Each attempt to control sends a message inward. Something bad could happen if I stop watching. So doubt becomes a signal. Silence becomes suspicious. Ambiguity becomes urgency. You don't wait. You interpret. You don't sit with not knowing. You convert it into action, analysis, or self-correction. And the body follows. Heart rate slightly elevated. Breath shallow without noticing. Jaw tight. Mind scanning even during rest. This is not anxiety in the dramatic sense. It's anxiety refined into functionality. You still show up. You still perform. You still decide. But always from a place that assumes danger unless proven otherwise. That's the loop. Control creates the illusion of safety. The illusion feeds vigilance. Vigilance keeps the system on edge. And the edge convinces you control is necessary. So you don't ask whether control is helping. You ask how to do it better. How to anticipate more accurately. How to eliminate more variables. How to avoid the one mistake that would expose you. You mistake preparedness for peace. But peace doesn't require readiness. And this is where the tension deepens. Because the mechanism that once protected you no longer knows how to turn itself off. This doesn't live in big crises. It lives in small, ordinary moments that never fully settle. You rewrite messages before sending them, then reread them after, then reread the replies, searching for what isn't there. A pause becomes a signal. A neutral tone becomes a possibility. A delay becomes a story your mind finishes without permission. You make plans, then remake them, then keep them flexible, just in case, which means they never really exist. You hesitate over simple decisions, not because they matter that much, but because choosing closes doors. And closed doors feel risky, so you wait for the moment where the choice feels undeniably right. Clear, safe. It rarely comes. Instead, you live in preparation mode. Always one step before action, always rehearsing the next adjustment. You research longer than necessary. You ask for more opinions than you trust. You stall, not because you're lazy, but because you're trying to avoid regret before it exists. And the strange thing is how invisible this looks from the outside. You're not frozen, you're busy. Busy thinking, busy checking, busy optimizing. Your life doesn't look chaotic, it looks managed. But inside, there's a constant sense that something is missing. Not a thing, a feeling. The feeling that you've arrived, that you can stop monitoring the situation, that you're allowed to stand where you are without adjusting the ground beneath your feet. Even rest becomes strategic. You rest to recover for vigilance, not to soften, not to drift. Your mind stays slightly ahead of your body. Your attention stays slightly outside the moment. And because this has been your rhythm for so long, you barely notice the cost. The cost is not exhaustion, it's distance. Distance from spontaneity, distance from desire, distance from the part of you that moves without permission. Everything becomes conditional. I'll relax when, I'll enjoy this once. I'll feel better after I know. But knowing never finishes. So you keep scanning your life for certainty, while life keeps happening in places you're too busy managing to inhabit. Michel de Montaigne wrote, in essence, that the greatest burden humans carry is the anticipation of suffering more than suffering itself. Not as comfort, as accusation, because what exhausts you isn't what happens. It's what you keep alive before it does. You live in rehearsal. You suffer events in advance. You experience losses that never fully arrive. Montaigne wasn't warning against danger. He was exposing a habit of mind. The habit of trying to outrun life by thinking faster than it unfolds. The belief that if you meet pain early enough, it will lose its power. But anticipation doesn't weaken fear, it multiplies it. Each imagined scenario trains your system to expect impact. Each attempt to be ready teaches your body that rest is irresponsible. So even when nothing happens, something is happening inside you. Your nervous system is spending energy on futures that remain hypothetical. This is the hidden cruelty of control. It doesn't protect you from pain. It extends pain's territory. You don't wait for life to test you. You test yourself continuously, as if existence were an exam you could fail at any moment. And slowly, without noticing, you stop living in time. You live in projection. Montaigne's insight cuts because it doesn't offer a solution. It names the trade. You traded presence for preparation. And you've been paying interest on imagined disasters ever since. Your body knows this before your mind admits it. It lives in small signals you've learned to ignore, the tension you carry into sleep, the way you wake up tired without understanding why, the irritability that appears without a clear cause. This isn't emotional, it's physiological. Your system doesn't distinguish between a real threat and a predicted one, so every imagined risk registers as impact. Your shoulders stay lifted, your stomach stays tight. Your breath never fully reaches the bottom. You call this being alert. Your body experiences it as being hunted, not dramatically, persistently. A low-grade activation that never resolves because there's nothing concrete to fight or flee from. Only possibilities, only maybes. So the energy has nowhere to go. It turns inward, becomes fatigue, becomes tension headaches, becomes a short fuse, becomes that strange feeling of being on even when nothing is happening. You don't crash, you wear down. And because you're still functioning, you don't register this as a problem. You register it as the cost of being responsible. But responsibility wasn't meant to feel like survival. Your body wasn't designed to live in constant anticipation. It was designed to respond, not to remain braced. So it adapts the only way it can, by staying partially mobilized all the time. This is why rest doesn't restore you. It only pauses the motion. The threat never resolves because it was never real to begin with. It was conceptual, mental, projected. And your body doesn't understand concepts. It understands tension. It understands release. It understands when something ends. Nothing ends for you. Everything stays pending. And that is why your system never stands down. Your need for control doesn't stay inside you. It leaks. People feel it before they can name it, in the way conversations tighten around you, in the way spontaneity hesitates before entering the room. You think you're being careful. They experience you as guarded, not cold, measured. You ask questions that sound neutral but carry tension. You seek clarity that arrives already loaded with expectation. You adjust your tone to prevent reactions before they happen. And the environment responds. People simplify themselves around you. They withhold what feels unpredictable. They sense that mistakes won't be received lightly, even if you never say so. So they become cautious too. This is the invisible loop. Your vigilance invites restraint. Their restraint confirms your suspicion that something needs to be managed. You notice subtle shifts. Less honesty, more politeness, more distance disguised as smooth interaction. And because you're highly perceptive, you register this immediately, which reinforces the idea that you need to stay alert. You don't see the full exchange, only your side of it. You think the world is unpredictable. The world is reacting, not to who you are, to the posture you're holding. Control creates friction, even when it's silent, even when it's well-intentioned, even when it wears the mask of care. People don't push back directly. They adjust around you. They stop surprising you. They stop challenging you. They stop bringing the unknown. And that feels like proof that vigilance works. But what it actually creates is a thinner version of reality. One where nothing explodes, but nothing fully arrives either. You don't get chaos. You don't get depth. You get management. And the quiet irony is this. The more you try to make life safe, the more life keeps a careful distance from you. Here is the sentence that breaks the illusion. You don't want peace. You want security. Peace doesn't require guarantees. Security does. Peace allows uncertainty to exist without interpreting it as danger. Security needs the environment to behave, people to be predictable, outcomes to stay within range. So you keep negotiating with life. If I understand this, I'll relax. If I prepare enough, I'll feel calm. If nothing unexpected happens, I'll be okay. But peace was never waiting at the end of those conditions. Security is never satisfied. It always asks for one more check, one more confirmation, one more sign that you're not about to lose control. So when you say you want calm, what you really want is insulation. From surprise, from disappointment, from being affected, and that's the danger. Because peace makes you available, security makes you armored. One softens your system, the other tightens it. One allows life to touch you, the other keeps life at a manageable distance. You've been confusing the two for so long that the tension feels normal, necessary, earned. But this sentence doesn't offer relief. It removes a justification. And once you see the difference, you can't unknow it. This is the moment where something shifts and it doesn't feel good. Because if what you've been chasing isn't peace, then all that effort wasn't misunderstood. It was misdirected. You didn't overdo it by accident. You built a system where control became your proof of worth, where vigilance became your moral ground, where staying guarded felt safer than being alive inside your own experience. And now the realization lands quietly and heavily. The thing you trusted to keep you safe is the same thing that's been keeping you tense. Control didn't just protect you, it organized your identity. You don't know who you are without it. Without scanning, without anticipating, without preparing for what hasn't happened yet. That's why letting go doesn't feel freeing. It feels like exposure. Not because danger is imminent, but because you've been using control as a boundary between you and uncertainty. Between you and disappointment. Between you and the risk of being affected. So when someone suggests ease, your body resists. When life opens a door you didn't plan for, you hesitate. When things feel light, you wait for the catch, because your system has learned that safety comes from tension, not trust. And this is the uncomfortable truth. The cage was never forced on you. You reinforced it because it worked. It kept surprises small, losses manageable, emotions contained, but it also narrowed your range. You didn't just avoid pain, you avoided depth. You didn't just prevent collapse, you prevented arrival. And standing here, seeing this clearly, there is no relief yet. Only a stark awareness. The strategy you mastered cannot take you any further without costing you something essential. And that's where the old identity starts to crack. Montaigne returned to this again and again in different forms, not as advice, as exposure. He suggested that humans suffer more from the stories they construct about the future than from the events themselves. Not because the future is harmless, but because imagination, when driven by fear, becomes a factory of wounds. This isn't philosophy meant to soothe, it's a blade, because it forces a question you've avoided. How much of your exhaustion comes from life, and how much comes from the constant effort to stay ahead of it? Montaigne never promised safety through wisdom. He pointed at something far more uncomfortable. That no amount of foresight grants immunity. That preparation does not cancel vulnerability. That control, when taken too far, becomes a form of self-inflicted pressure. You didn't misunderstand this, you chose it. You chose anticipation over exposure, you chose readiness over presence. You chose to live slightly before yourself all the time. And now the cost is clear enough to sting, but not clear enough to offer an exit. Because this insight doesn't come with instructions, it only removes the fantasy that thinking harder will save you. What remains is the tension of standing without armor, knowing exactly why you've been wearing it. If this discomfort feels familiar, that's not accidental. Because most people don't question this pattern. They optimize it. They look for better tools, better systems, better ways to stay in control without falling apart. They don't stay with the unease long enough to see what it's costing them. So if you're still here, listening without rushing to fix this, it says something uncomfortable about you. You're not looking for reassurance, you're looking at the structure. This is the kind of work that doesn't reward you quickly. It doesn't calm you down on command. It doesn't tell you that everything will be fine if you just try harder. And that's why most people leave. If you choose to stay, to keep exposing these patterns instead of polishing them, you already know this isn't about motivation or improvement. It's about seeing clearly enough that you can't go back to pretending this is peace. If that kind of tension matters to you, staying connected here makes sense, not for answers. But to keep this line of questioning open, even when it removes your favorite defenses. There's a reason patterns like this don't dissolve just by being understood. Because they're not habits, they're contracts, silent ones, agreements you made with yourself about how to stay intact in a world that once felt unpredictable. Rules that were never written down, but still govern how close you let life get. Luciana Santos writes about this in O Acordo Esquecido, not as a guide, as an exposure. The idea isn't that you chose control because you wanted power. It's that you chose it because it felt like the only way to remain standing without falling apart. And once a strategy saves you once, you keep renewing it, even when it starts charging interest. That book doesn't offer relief from this tension. It names the exchange. What you traded for predictability, what you gave up to feel safe, what parts of yourself stayed contained so the system wouldn't collapse. If you're curious, the reference is left where it belongs, in the fixed comment, not as a solution, as a mirror. At some point, this stops being about anxiety, control, or habits. It becomes an identity problem, because the person who is always prepared, always scanning, always ahead of danger, isn't just managing life. They are maintaining a version of themselves that survives by tension. And walking away from that doesn't feel like healing. It feels like betrayal. If you loosen your grip, who are you without vigilance? If you stop anticipating, what protects you when things go wrong? If you don't read the signs, who are you when uncertainty lands without warning? This is the real threshold. Not learning to relax, not trusting more, but accepting that a certain version of you cannot come with you any further. The one who stays upright by staying braced. The one who earns safety through constant readiness. The one who believes that being affected is a weakness. That version didn't fail, it did its job. But every survival identity has an expiration point. Not because it breaks, but because it starts costing more than it protects. What you're standing in now isn't a technique gap, it's a passage. A crossing where certainty loses its authority and presence hasn't earned your trust yet. Where control no longer works, but letting go still feels reckless. Where you can't go back to ignorance, and you don't yet know how to live without armor. This isn't growth as improvement, it's growth as loss. The loss of a familiar tension, the loss of a posture that once made you feel safe, the loss of an identity built around not being caught off guard. And the question underneath all of it isn't how to feel calmer. It's whether you're willing to exist without guarantees and still call that living. So this is where it ends. Not with clarity, not with relief. With a question that doesn't resolve itself. If security has been the price you paid to feel okay, and that price is no longer sustainable, what happens when you stop paying it? Not theoretically, practically. When you don't check one more time, when you don't anticipate the reaction, when you don't neutralize uncertainty before it touches you, who are you then? Not the improved version, not the healed one, the exposed one, the one without guarantees, without rehearsal, without armor. There's no instruction here because instructions would turn this back into control, and control is the very thing being questioned. So the only honest ending is an open one. If you remove security as your organizing principle, what are you actually afraid will happen? Not what you tell yourself, what you avoid admitting. That's the question that belongs in the comments, not for discussion, for confrontation. And whatever answer surfaces, notice this. It won't feel like peace. It will feel like standing somewhere you can't manage yet. And that's the point.